Can I get a virus by looking at email? Well, it used to be scary easy. Hi everyone, I'm Leo Notenboom for askleo.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure and hit the subscribe button, and at the end of the video, if you find it useful, hit the like button. Those two things both help other people find what they're looking for when they're searching on YouTube. So I get this question fairly often. It's a concern that since email is used so frequently to transmit malware, in fact, it's probably the single biggest distribution vector for viruses and more, is it possible for an infection to happen simply by looking at the email, just by having it on your screen? Now, in the past, it used to be really easy. The good news is that today it's really hard. But let me explain exactly why this scenario comes up and why it actually was a very valid concern. So email, as you may or may not know, has several different formats. The most simple one is plain text. In other words, the email itself contains text and only text. There's nothing, no formatting, no spacing, no any of that other stuff that can make some email actually look kind of good. And that is in fact what happened. What they decided to do was create what was called rich text email. Now, HTML, hypertext markup language, is what I call the language of the web. It is the language that's used to create web pages, and it includes formatting and pictures and more, so that it's what allows a web page like any of mine to include colors and bold text, blue text, headings, different sizes of fonts, and so forth. HTML by itself doesn't, I'll just say, do anything. HTML is static. Once again, it's simply presenting information, but it doesn't actually take any action. That was resolved by what's called DHTML, dynamic HTML, and the JavaScript programming language. Modern browsers now support both of these. And in fact, we kind of sort of wrap it all up and just call it HTML version 5. Dynamic HTML, as the dynamic implies, actually allows you to do things. JavaScript, being a programming language, actually allows you to write programs that run when you display a web page. So if I wanted to, I can have a piece of text that changes its color when you mouse over it. That is dynamic. That is an action that's taking place in your browser in response to something you're doing. So as you can imagine, when you have the ability to have a program that affects what's being displayed on the screen, it's time to get concerned about whether or not that program could be malicious. And as I said, in the early days, it was. What could happen is that email, since it could do things as soon as it was displayed, would in fact be able to do malicious things as soon as it was displayed. So that did cause a problem at one point. It was actually worse because some email programs, like say Outlook with Microsoft Office, you could leave your program running, of course, with the most recent message highlighted. And below that would be a preview pane. In other words, Outlook would display the message that was currently highlighted. If you received another message, then Outlook would move the selection to the most recent message that had just come in and display it. If the message was malicious, that malicious activity would happen without your even being in the room. Now, of course, all of that has changed. As you can imagine, that was pretty serious, and it was pretty quickly fixed. The biggest change across almost all email programs is that the things that allow an email content to be malicious were removed. In other words, they actually disabled features and functionality in DHTML and JavaScript when those things are used in an email. So the ability of an email to actually do something malicious simply by being viewed does not happen. No, you cannot get malware simply by looking at email. Now, there are a couple of really important caveats here that I want to point out because there are still issues with email. Like I said, it is the most common vector for malware to make the rounds. There are two things. One is, of course, images. When you display an image, you're actually fetching something from a remote server in some cases. That can tell that remote server that you got the message, that you opened the message, that you're taking a look at the message. If it happens to be spam, that tells the spammer, hey, we got a live one. Let's send them more spam. It's malicious in the sense that you're only going to get more spam. It's not going to cause malware to get installed on your machine. But it is the reason that almost all email programs no longer display images by default. In other words, you have to actually ask for the images to be displayed. You may need to do it on a per message basis, or you may say that this sender, the person I'm getting an email from, is safe. But by default, for unknown senders, images aren't displayed simply because that can be used to track whether or not you've opened the message. The other thing, the critical thing, is email's ability to include attachments. And that's true for regardless of the format of the email, be it plain text or rich text or HTML or something else. Attachments have always been possible. Attachments allow you to literally attach any kind of digital data to an email message. Now, in order for that attachment to do something, the recipient has to open it. That's where things get scary. Because if you open an attachment that happens to be malicious, that happens to be a virus, you can infect your machine. That's how malware makes it around. Email is sent. That makes it look like something important and includes an attachment that you're supposed to open in order to deal with whatever the important thing is. As soon as you open the attachment, your machine becomes infected. That's why people like me have been saying for so very long, the right thing to do is to always be skeptical of attachments. Make sure it's from someone you trust. Make sure that the attachment is in fact expected and something that makes sense for that person to have sent you. If not, don't open it. Maybe ask them if they really sent it. Maybe run a malware scanner on the file before you run it. But don't just blindly open attachments unless you are absolutely certain that they're safe. Be skeptical. Be safe. So the rules here are actually very simple. You're not going to get malware from simply looking at a message. You do need to keep Windows and all of the software on your machine as up to date as possible. You do need to be running anti-malware software. You never want to open an attachment unless you're expecting it and trust the person that sent it. And you should never click on a link in an email message unless you trust the person that sent it and you can obviously tell that it's going someplace you trust. I hope this was helpful. I hope this lets you feel a little bit better about opening your email messages and just looking. For links, for related articles, for updates and more, visit askleo.com/1931. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.